Hi friends, welcome to this latest episode of the Nationalist View, and today we have with us a very special guest, Mr. Yeshi Dawa. Yeshi ji, welcome to the show. Yeshi ji is a senior researcher at 108 Peace Institute and primarily works on Tibet and Tibet-related issues. And today we are going to talk about Tibet and what is happening in Tibet, what are the challenges in Tibet, and what China is doing in Tibet. So, as all of us are aware, that China had illegally occupied Tibet and annexed it in the 1950s, and then Dalai Lama came to India from there, and now there is a Tibetan government in exile at Dharamshala in India. And since then, the freedom movement of Tibet has been going on, and there has been repression, severe crackdown, false propaganda by the Chinese authorities. So we are going to wade through all this and kind of demystify what is happening in Tibet, because there is an absolute 100% media censorship in Tibet, and we hardly get to hear what is happening there. So, Yossi ji, welcome to the show. And my first question is, could you briefly explain the significance of Dalai Lama in Tibetan Buddhism and why the question of his succession is so central to the Tibetan freedom movement?
First of all, I would like to thank Arunji for this wonderful opportunity to talk about Tibet. As you rightly mentioned, that we don't get much of the information about Tibet from Tibet because of China's censorship and their restrictions on the flow of information from Tibet to the world. So this platform serves as a medium to create awareness about what is happening in Tibet and the issue of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, particularly the reincarnation matter. So, as you asked questions about the significance of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama in Tibetan Buddhism, so to answer that question, I think I may not be in a position to tell you the significance of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama in Tibetan Buddhism, because his significance is very vast and something which is very unfathomable for someone like me. But as a Tibetan, as a devout Buddhist, I was also educated under his leadership back in 1999. I fled Tibet at the age of 8, and my journey into India took almost 2 months on feet. So the journey was very hard, and it also gave me a lot of strengths. So whatever I am today is all because of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. And to give an example of how his leadership actually shaped Tibetans in general, for someone like me, I didn't have to pay a single penny for my education right from class 1 to 12. Even when I did my colleges, I didn't have to pay a single penny. So this is how His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama benefited Tibetans in general. Now, if we talk about his significance in terms of Buddhism, we Tibetans always look at His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama as the manifestation of Avalokiteshvara, a god of compassion. He embodies this very spirit. And if you look at his teachings and his talks, he always talks about the importance of compassion, because this very simple yet very powerful entity is very much required in our day-to-day life. And that is what His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama teaches. So, from a Buddhist point of view, His Holiness is what we call the incarnation of Lord Buddha. And this is also what former Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, said it. He said His Holiness the Dalai Lama is the incarnation of the Lord Buddha. So this is how we view His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, and he has huge significance in Tibetan Buddhism. And today, if you look at His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, and he does not just belong to the Tibetan Buddhism, but he belongs to the whole world. And when His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama said that his institution would continue, I wrote a piece on the Times of India where I argued that the continuation of his institution is actually for the world, not for the Tibetans.
Uh, Yeshiji, we know that China has been attempting to influence or control the selection of the next Dalai Lama. And so what mechanisms are they putting in place to, legitimize their choice?
China has been claiming that they have the right to choose the next Dalai Lama. So when I say China, it actually covers all citizens in China. But there are so many Chinese who look at His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama as a true leader, as a compassionate leader. So I would rather call it CCP, so that if we look
Chinese
at
Communist
the
Party.
yes, Chinese Communist Party, if we look at its history, the very founding father of the Communist Party of China, Mao Zedong, who notoriously said that religion is a poison, and they don't believe in religion at all. And how could they interfere in the reincarnation of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama? Because the subject is very much related to religion, and they don't believe in what we call life after death. Now they are claiming that they have the right to choose the next Dalai Lama through a system called Golden Urn system, which was actually imposed on Tibet in 1793 by Manchu Emperor. Now the contrary is very simple. Back then, the Manchu Emperor was a devout Buddhist. Now, unlike the Manchu Emperor then, if you look at today's CCP leadership, they don't believe in religion at all, and yet they claim that they have the right to choose the next Dalai Lama. So this is a very paradoxical in nature. So when I say paradoxical in nature, China's claim about the succession of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama is actually what we call all hat and no cattle, because they actually don't like the current Dalai Lama, but they are very much in search of the next Dalai Lama. So there's a big contradiction. Now, they are trying to sell this narrative called the Golden Urn system, but this very system is actually corrupted. It's a corrupt practice. We can learn it from the case of how they chose the 11th Panchen Lama, Gensen Nobu, by the Chinese government. So, and now what they are trying to do is they are trying to hire foreign scholars and foreign vloggers, and they let them to travel to China and Tibet, and they let them to talk to common citizens, common Tibetans, and common Tibetan monks there. And they normally ask the questions about how China has the right to choose the next Dalai Lama. And they are also trying to pass a very subtle message, like how China is actually preserving religious freedom in Tibet. For example, a few days back, there is a foreigner vlogger who actually made a documentary on Tibet. His name is Andy Burham. Uh, if you go through his documentary, he actually tries to debunk how Western media look at China, how Western media look at Tibet. So he is actually trying to counter their views on Tibet. And he has been traveling to different parts of Tibet. And he actually touches all the issues that Tibetans in diaspora have been raising. For example, the religious freedom and the colonial boarding school. One incident that he even visits a primary school where he shows how Tibetan children are actually given the right to learn the mother tongue, that is Tibetan language. So these are actually how China is trying to propagate their narrative. So this is they're using all these mediums. I'm sure many more propaganda and narrative campaign will definitely pop up. So I'm always watchful. So this is how China is playing against the Tibetan narrative and the succession of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama in particular.
So you talked about this foreign blogger and the documentary which this foreign guy has made. What do you think? These are all stage managed things which were there, just put in front of the camera as prop, and the reality is quite different. So would you like to comment on this?
Definitely, it is a staged demonstration from the Chinese government. So they know how to sell the narrative of Chinese government because it is His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama who actually internationalized the issue of Tibet, and Tibet became limelight in the 1990s and 2000s. And now China thinks that it is their time to uh, just bury all these limelight and the recognition that Tibet received in the last few decades. So now they are inviting foreign journalists, foreign bloggers, and they give them all the access to different parts of Tibet. And one very interesting thing is we all know that Facebook is banned in China. Um, we have Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, because Chinese government fears that these mediums could ignite some sort of protest in China in general. But if you look at the foreign journalists and bloggers, they have all this access. Can you imagine? So we can clearly see that it is a staged demonstration, and they would like to achieve how these bloggers and foreign journalists could disseminate China's narrative to the whole world. And one interesting fact that I would like to share here is when some of Indian journalists visited Tibet, one Chinese woman who could speak Hindi fluently actually speaks to one of the Indian journalists. So this is a very interesting way of disseminating China's propaganda. And one thing that we have to keep in mind is China is very clever because if she speaks fluent Hindi, it actually attracts lots of Indians. And now, whatever she speaks, actually, it is all about China's narrative campaign. So this is how they are using all these mediums. So I could clearly say that this is a staged demonstration to achieve China's goals.
Uh, Yeshiji, we see, China is a major economic hub now. And recently we saw there was US President Trump had imposed tariffs on China, then he withdrew some of the tariffs. Now they are waiting. The rest of the world also, they do a lot of business with China. So how is, and nowadays they also say that it is the economics which govern the politics. So how do you see the global community's reaction to China's moves on especially the issue of choosing the new Dalai Lama, and also the ongoing repression in Tibet? So are there any concrete diplomatic or policy measures being taken by other countries, what you call the so-called the Western liberal democracies? Because India has been playing its part because the government in exile is in Dharamshala. His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, so he also resides, in India, and the large number of Tibetans or people from Tibet who have come and who are residing here peacefully. So India seems to have played its part quite significantly, but rest of the world, do you think it's more of a lip service which is being, paid, and increasingly, how do you see it? The talk about Tibet's repression, the issue of how Chinese are trying to hijack the subject of domination of or the choosing of the new Dalai Lama. So, how do you see the reaction of the global community?
First of all, I would like to make it very clear here. Uh, the Indian government has been so supportive for the cause of Tibet. I'm definitely sure that no other country on this planet is more supportive for the cause of Tibet than India. So I would like to reiterate my sincere gratitude for the Indian government and her people. And we have been in India for almost 6 decades. So this sums up how Indian government looks at the issue of Tibet. So we are very grateful for the government of India. Now, if you look at the global community, I'm sure the international community is very much affected by China's economic power. So they are always trying to muscle their economic power to suppress major countries in the whole world. And whichever country talks about something that does not go in favor of China, then they get lots of reactions from the Chinese government, and they would also pressurize by China's economic muscles. So this is one thing that we have to keep in mind, because when we talk about politics in general, it is actually all about national interests. So so every country needs to protect its national interest. That is that is the fundamental of the international politics. But when a country does something that does not compromise its national interest, at the same time, it also elevates the course of Tibet, then it can have lots of uh, uh, impacts on the issue of Tibet. For example, if you look at the United States of America, they have so far passed four major laws. And the look at the if you look at the 2020 law, Tibet Policy and Support Act, it clearly and loudly talks about uh, how His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama's reincarnation must be chosen. And it clearly states that China doesn't have an ounce of authority in choosing the next Dalai Lama. So now, if you look at the efforts put by the Central Tibetan administration, recently some of the countries from Europe uh, put forward their views on the issue of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Look at the Netherlands government. They passed a resolution by saying that China doesn't have the right to choose the next Dalai Lama. Now, the global community is actually coming up against China's assertion on the issue of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. So I'm sure many more will come uh, so long as we advocate it and so long as we lobby around the issue of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama to the different countries. So they will have lots of international pressures on the Chinese government.
Yeshi, there is a Tibetan government in exile in India, and we have a Tibetan parliament also. So, what has been the official stand of the Tibetan spiritual and political leaderships on this China's claim to appoint the next Dalai Lama? Has any resolution been passed in the Tibetan parliament, or has any resolution been passed by the Tibetan government in exile in its cabinet? So, if you could elaborate a little bit about what has been the political and the spiritual leadership's official stance on this Chinese move.
If you look at the cabinet of Tibet, the Central Tibetan Administration led by Sekyong Pemba Tsering, they passed a statement which clearly states that His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama has the sole authority to choose the succession. So it actually implies a message that says that China doesn't have the right to choose the next Dalai Lama. Now, if we look at the different religious sects in Tibetan Buddhism, during the 15th Tibetan religious conference held in Dharamshala in July of this year, they passed a unanimous resolution by saying that whatever His Holiness says, they will stick to it. So it is very clear that the Tibetan government in exile, that is known as the Central Tibetan Administration, and all the spiritual leaders of Tibetan Buddhism have actually come on a common ground and by saying that His Holiness is the has the sole authority to choose the next Dalai Lama, and they convey a very strong message to the Chinese government by saying that they don't have the right to choose next Dalai Lama.
So one last question I want to ask Yeshi. What is the now broad direction of the Tibetan freedom movement? Where does it stand? And what is happening in Tibet? If you can just give an overview in terms of repression, in terms of subjugating the culture of Tibet, the original culture of Tibet. So, in which direction you know the Tibet freedom movement is heading? And it's also because if people want to, join kind of or give support to the Tibetan freedom movement, so how they can do it. So, if you can, talk about it a little bit.
Sure. If you look at the Freedom House Index, I think for the past 5 or 6 years, Tibet has been consecutively listed as the least freed country in the whole world. So that actually talks a lot about the situation inside Tibet. And to give some clear examples and to support this argument, I think if you look at what happened recently, there is a Tibetan singer called Asang who actually did a cover song. The title of the cover song is "The Prince of Peace," and he sang it, and it went viral. And after a few days, he was imprisoned. So today we don't know about his whereabouts. So this is how China actually censors and restricts on the issue of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. And as per the report issued by the International Campaign for Tibet, as of now, there have been more than 30 Tibetan individuals who have been put behind the bar for talking about His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, or directly or indirectly engaging in the celebration of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama's birthdays. Now, China is actually imposing so much restrictions on Tibetans in Tibet. And during the birthday celebration of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama in this July, there were lots of trucks loaded with Chinese soldiers patrolling different cities in Tibet. And so this is an example of how China is actually censoring Tibet. At the same time, how they are trying to uh, divert Tibetans from His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. So this is a very interesting thing. China has been implementing different policies in Tibet for the past 7 decades, but they still couldn't uh, capture the hearts and minds of Tibetans. Now they're trying to implement different policies, including what they now what we call a Xizang for Tibet. It is actually an erasure of the international identity from international forums and platforms. And in Tibet, China introduced colonial boarding schools so that the upcoming generation will not have an opportunity to have the exposure of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, and these could lead to uh, the slowly, should I say, fading away of Tibetan issue from the younger generation. So it is very sad at the same time because Tibetans in Tibet don't have the basic rights. So we don't have to talk much about how China actually tries to distort Tibet's history, but it is very difficult situation happening in Tibet at this point of time.
Though I said the last question, but as you rightly mentioned that there's a lot of Chinese propaganda. So if you can tell to our viewers, are there any particular websites or platforms from where they can get the correct picture of what is happening in Tibet? So that would be helpful. We'll also put the detail in the description box. So if you could mention, that if, let's say, I want to track what is actually happening in Tibet. So are there any platforms which can give us some picture, some true picture about it, countering the Chinese propaganda?
Sure. So there have been so many reports about China's investment in the propaganda. I think one report says that they are spending billions of dollars in creating a propaganda around the world. One example that clearly speaks about how China actually uses its different mediums to propagate their narrative campaign. If you look at CGTN, um, it has more than 125 million followers on Facebook, despite its ban in China. And one recent interview, I think a few days back, and a journalist was talking to a Tibetan monk, and the way she asks questions is very interesting. She first touches about the general aspects of Tibetan Buddhism, how that Tibetan monk thrives in Tibet. And in between, she comes up with very subtle questions that actually tries to debunk the myth created by different the Western society about Tibet. Now she asks questions about how reincarnation thrives in Tibet, and that monk actually talks about how it thrived in Tibet with the help of Chinese government, and he also talks about uh, how Chinese government has the right to choose all the reincarnated lamas in Tibet. And one infactual information that he disseminates is he says that the began in 13th century, then it thrived. And he says that all the reincarnated lamas, right from 13th century, were actually consulted with the local government, quote and unquote. So that is completely uh, uh, not true because how China actually claims about having the right to choose next Dalai Lama popped up in 17th century or 17th or 18th century, right from 1793. Now, we have this system right from 13th century. And then he's also trying to distort this very history of Tibet. And that journalist also asks a question about how China is actually maintaining its religious freedom in Tibet. And that monk um, talks as if he has all the religious freedom in Tibet, and he is actually trying to represent all the Tibetans in Tibet. So that is completely that is not true. So we all know that they don't have religious freedom in Tibet. If they have, then why can't a Tibetan in Tibet keep a picture of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama? And why can't they talk publicly about His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama? So this is a complete lie from the from that monk because he was used to propagate China's narrative. So this is one such example. And now there's so many examples. And now they are also trying to hire foreign scholars uh, to talk about the reincarnation of His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama. Now, very soon, I'm sure they will invite Indian vloggers to China and to Tibet and to cover their narrative. So these are very subtle, but it comes up with very powerful narrative campaign.
Thank you, Yashiji. We'll keep on tracking the Tibet freedom movement, and we hope to have Yeshi Dawaji soon back on our podcast to talk about more issues. But thank you for now, and it has been an enlightening conversation, Yashiji. And thank you so much for taking time out from your busy schedule. We'll be back soon with another podcast, and if you've liked this, please share it, like it, and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions on the Tibet freedom movement, so you can post it in the comment box. We'll take it to Mr. Yeshidawa and we'll try and get answers for that. And Mr. Yeshi Dawa, will once again thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So before I end, I would like to say one thing. All the foreign vloggers are traveling to China, Tibet. They're actually trying to sell China's narrative. And I would like to say one thing. A person's conscientiousness can be bought by different factors. But in this case, I think money plays a very important role. So it is money that can substitute a person's conscientiousness. So if we China is very clever at spending money and buying foreign bloggers and individuals. So we have to be beware of such initiatives from the Chinese government, and particularly in India. This is very important to understand about how China is trying to spread their information. And thank you so much, Arunji. And this platform actually serves as a medium to create awareness about Tibet. I'm sure whatever I have spoken may not be helpful, but I think I've planted some seeds for future discourse. So you will get to learn so many things if you come closer to Tibet and Tibetan issue, and particularly His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Thank you so much, Arunji.
Thank you. And no, I think whatever you have said, it's not only planting the seed, but you have given fantastic information with absolute clarity and lucidity and called off the and has exposed the Chinese propaganda. And we have also been doing this same thing. There have been a lot of other videos on also on our channel on in which we have consistently exposed the Chinese propaganda and will continue to do so. It's a fascinating subject also as a journalist for us. So, in fact, I have written a series of articles on the Chinese propaganda network and the Chinese spy networks also, which is available on news18.com. But we'll talk about it some other time. But thank you so much, Yeshiji. And we are hoping to have you back, to have you back soon on our podcast. Thank you so much.